Now, you've all heard about the story of the farmer who got caught in front of his home in a flood, and as they came to take him, he refused to go, saying that he believed in God. And then as they came a second time, the waters had risen now to the second floor of his home, and he said to him, come before it's too late. And he says, no, I trust in God. And then he came a third time, he was on the roof, and he refused to go again. And he said, no, I trust in God, everything's going to be fine. And then as the story goes, as you well know, that he didn't make it. And when he didn't make it, when he gets up to heaven, he says, he says to God, I trusted in you and you let me down. To which God, of course, replies, I let you down. I sent you a boat 3 times and you didn't refuse to get into it. So the reason I sort of repeat this very quickly is because what's the moral of this story? Now, if we look at it from on its sort of face value, it's very easy. The moral of the story is don't just sit back and rely on God, but realize that God has given us and has sent us the means necessary to help ourselves. Now, that's all very well and good, and it's great advice to live by. So the question you're probably sitting there asking yourselves is, why the heck is he talking about this today? And the reason is because there is a particular line in the Torah that probably gets lost amid all the pageantry and the wonders of the crossing of the Red Sea. But should nevertheless, if you are paying attention to the reading, speak to us to try to find not only, but to discover, to keep our faith in God in this life, which I'm going to share with you in just a minute, a story. But first, we've got to set the stage. And it's something that Oded and I discussed a number of times in our classes, so he sort of knows the story pretty well. When the Bnei Yisrael and the children of Israel reached the Red Sea, they were afraid. They didn't know what to do. So what did they do? They complained to Moses that among other things, they would have been better off remaining in servitude in Egypt. The people cried out and Moses prayed to God. What did God say? Those very famous lines. I can see you smiling. Remember, we discussed it. God said to Moses, Ma titzak elai, why are you shouting to me? Dabel b'nei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel. Be so, and they should continue traveling. And what did Moses do? He listened to God, lifted his rod over the sea. But you know what happened? When Moses lifted his rod the first time over the sea, nothing happened. He tried again and again, but we're told the sea didn't move. And there's a beautiful midrash that tells us, and again, you and I studied this, Oded, with Mum actually, Mum was there as well, that suddenly out of the crowd, one man, identified by the midrash as Nachshon ben Aminadav, from the tribe of Judah, to the astonishment of the people, he jumped into the water. And then he waded through the water until the water reached his waist. Nothing happened. He then went deeper and deeper until all the people watched in wonder and in horror as the water came up to his nostrils. And we're told by the Midrash that it was at this point, with Nachshon about to drown, that the sea started to part itself and the Israelites were able to cross in safety. So this Midrash, a very nice story, this Midrashic text, is to teach us a lesson about faith. At first, the Israelites didn't have faith that God would save them. And like that farmer, they stood around and they waited. It was only when a particular man, Nachshon, expressed his faith through his actions that God did his part and delivered. And only when God delivered are we then told the rest of the people all of a sudden had faith. Of course, as we know, That faith that the Israelites exhibited at the Red Sea did not last very long. It lasted 3 days. A mere 3 days after the greatest miracle that could have been experienced by another human being. What did they start doing? They started to kvetch. They started to complain to Moses and to God. They had no water to drink. So much for faith. So much for the lesson of Nachshon. And we know what came later. The Israelites complained again. They didn't like the menu. They didn't like the food. They complained that they were better off in Egypt. And finally, they complained that they were leaderless when Moses went up on Har Sinai. And they reacted by building and worshiping the golden calf. You heard the expression, fame is fleeting. Well, I guess that we can also say that faith is fleeting as well. But although our faith in God may be fleeting, and although despite witnessing his miracles, we still turn our backs on him at the first sign of trouble, we have to still remember that God's faith in us is not fleeting. And God doesn't turn his back on us. And that is why when the people complained that they were thirsty and had nothing to drink, like the boat in the story, what did God do? He showed Moses a branch of a tree and told him to throw it into the water. Moses threw it into the water, and the water suddenly became sweet, and they drank. It shows us that God does not turn his back on us. And then God said, and here's the line I want to talk to you about. God said, if you will listen to the voice of God, and Odette, I want you to remember this for the whole of your life. If you will listen to the voice of God and do what is right in his eyes, hear his commandments and keep all his statutes, then any of the diseases I placed upon Egypt, I will not place on you. For I am your God and your healer. I am your God and your healer. What do those words mean? Does it mean that we should rely on God to heal us? That we shouldn't rely on the boats that came to pick up the farmer? That we shouldn't go or even go to our doctors and take medicine, transfusions, vaccinations, surgeries, whatever, because God is the healer? Do we really believe that God, and only God, will heal us from illness, disease, and sickness? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's not what these words mean. Not what these words mean at all. They're not designed to have us only rely on God. Rather, these words exist to tell us that when it is that we really need our faith in God most, when we are sick, when illness, when hardship, when tragedy strikes, or when we need comfort, when we need support, when we need healing, those are especially the times that we are told to turn to God. And it is why so many people get placed on our Mishaberach list. If you listen to our Mishaberach list and you looked around at the people that were standing during the Mishaberach, Jew and non-Jew alike is on our list. And those are times especially that God will answer us. Maybe not always to our liking. We accept that. But the message is still there. I am God, your healer. Turn to me, call on me. Now, it's true that we each reach out differently when loss or tragedy or illness strikes. Many tend to lose faith. I've seen it many times in my career. Many lose faith. Many are angry at God. Even people of deep, abiding faith sometimes see their faith falter at those times. But as easy it is to give up, as easy is it to lose faith, We mustn't ever lose our faith. We can't. We can't actually lose faith. We can reject it temporarily. One way that helps to maintain our faith is by recalling the examples of those who always maintain their faith through the most trying of times. I want to give you one example before I conclude. The example is from Ruth Heinemann. Ruth Heinemann was born in a small town in Germany called Kloppenburg. She was a young girl when her synagogue was burned down during Kristallnacht. She and a younger sister were sent to the Kindertransport to be raised in London during the war. Her parents and her other two sisters were passengers on the ill-fated St. Louis and ultimately lost their lives at Sobibor. Ruth Heinemann had every reason to lose her faith. Yet, her recently published life story is called Challenging Faith, because Ruth, despite what she went through, never lost faith in God, and in fact sought God to help her through her life's many challenges. Yes, we put our faith in the medical profession. I'm telling you from first hand, we put our faith in the medical profession. We put our faith in medical science as well as we should, and in fact Judaism requires it. But, says God, you should also place your faith and your trust in me, because I am the ultimate healer. And just like one trusts our doctors and we trust them implicitly, so too one has to believe that you also need the spiritual medicine that God prescribes for us. And that will also help to keep us healthy, if not physically, but certainly spiritually, as only He can. In life, we must understand that just like the Israelites at the Yam Suf at the Red Sea, the waters are cold. They're sometimes dangerous. The currents can be strong and unpredictable. Sometimes the water splits and sometimes it doesn't. But if we don't have faith and trust in God and in each other, if we only wait for the nachshons of the world to jump in, rather than being ourselves like nachshon, then the waters will never part. And this is why we must continue to pray, to believe, and to have faith, even when things seem very dark. And hopefully, we won't lose our faith in God just because things don't go our way, or just because we encounter tragedy, we encounter loss in our lives. And hopefully, our demonstrations of faith won't require the kinds of action taken by Nachshon. It won't require the great leap of faith that he took. But rather, let us remain steadfast in our faith. Let us continue to see the miracles in our lives. Let us rely on God as our ultimate healer, as we demonstrate our faith in God in ways both large and small. And may God continue to demonstrate his faith in and love of us by continuing to perform miracles for us today, just as he did to our ancestors. And if and when loss, tragedy, pain, or anguish, as unfortunately it often does, strikes, may we continue to turn to God, and may he continue to heal us. Amen v'amen. Shabbat Shalom.